Ms. Rachel Kyte is the Vice President of Sustainable Development at the World Bank. Rachel has the overall responsibility for a very long title now, the World Bank Global Initiatives in Agriculture, Environment, Energy, Infrastructure, Urban and Social Development, along with global public good issues in all of those areas. Please welcome Rachel to the stage.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you to EFC for the invitation to be here, and thank you to the hosts in Copenhagen. I too was here in 2009 at COP15, and I actually swore I would never come back to the Bella Center. I was just coming in from the airport this morning from Stockholm to one of my staff saying, I said I would never come back. But you've built a fancy hotel since I was here, so congratulations on that. I too left COP15 convinced that there are coalitions of the working who will move us past the sclerosis that we face at the international level on the issue of climate change. We are a partner of the C40, a very proud partner of the C40, and I applaud everything that they are doing. And it is coalitions that are working like that which will prove that there is a future that is possible, that is different from today. And I think one of the real problems that we face is helping people imagine that they could live in a different way and that it would be possible and that they wouldn't lose from that there will be jobs in that future world, that their kids will be able to breathe more easily in that future world, but they won't have to trade that off for something else that they hold dear. And one of the big problems that we have in imagining an inclusive and greener growth, a different growth pattern than the one we have today, is painting the picture. And of course, one of the places where it's easiest to do that is, of course, at the city level. William Gibson, the Canadian-American science fiction writer, once said that the future is here. It's just very unevenly distributed. It is very unevenly distributed when we think about cities. There are cities around the world where the future is stark and hostile and difficult and violent. And there are cities such as Copenhagen where, as well as social problems that exist in every city, you can see something which is fundamentally very different. And of course, we would agree with C40 and everybody else that the future is only going to be found through the city. We look at cities from a global perspective as a development finance institution. We look at cities with a long-term perspective, that by 2050, 2/3 of the population will be living in cities and urban areas. 80% of that urban population will be in what we call today the developing world. That every month 5 million people move into a city globally in pursuit of jobs, in pursuit of opportunity. That there are 1 billion people today that live in slums, but that will double and then nearly triple by the time we get to 2050. You know, and one of the conceits of development over the last few decades has been that it's better to be poor, better to be absolute poor, frankly, in a slum than it is in a rural area, because we will be able to reach you with services, that with new modern information technology we can find new ways to reach you. Climate change may turn that all the way around. It may be now that the most dangerous place in the world to be poor is in an urban slum, because the intensity and the frequency of the extreme weather events that we will see as a result of climate change is going to slam into those slums again and again and again. And it will be on the backs of those mayors to try to find the solution. Now, for the World Bank, our mission is to now, after having reframed it in the last year under the leadership of Jin Yong Kim, our new president, to be in partnership with our client countries and with the private sector and with you and anybody else that wants to be part of this challenge, to try to find a way to end absolute poverty by 2030, to speed the curve at which we are going to end absolute poverty. And that because people don't aspire to just not being absolutely poor, people aspire to having jobs, having healthy kids, to prosper, we have a shared objective of ending absolute poverty by 2030 and building a shared prosperity. That shared prosperity contains a notion that we cannot build prosperity today that will destroy the opportunity of prosperity for future generations, and that's where the whole sustainability piece comes into it. And I'm very happy to talk outside this room about the difficulty of the measurement of that so that you do what it is that you measure, or you measure what you do. But the reality is that there are a couple of curveballs, to use an American sporting analogy, that are going to make that more difficult. Conflict and violence is one, but the other really big one is climate change. Climate change is the carpet that will be pulled out from underneath us. It will grind people back into poverty. It will make it more difficult for people to prosper. We, as a result, have, as an economics-based institution, decided to put our arms right back around the science, which so many of you have done so much in the past 20 years to promote. And we could talk about how well we've done that. We can talk about how we communicate that. But we've put our arms around the science. And the science now tells us that we're on track for a 4-degree world by 2100. Of course, here in Copenhagen in 2009 in this room, we agreed that we should be at 2 degrees. We are sailing right past that target right now. At 4 degrees, sea level rise for many coastal cities in Southeast Asia is going to cause enormous problems in housing and transport and water and sanitation and livability. At 4 degrees, there are a number of cities in the Middle East and North Africa where they will be experiencing what they do today, but at even more extreme levels. Dry, hot season temperatures in excess of 54, 55, 56, 57 degrees centigrade. These are the countries where the urban youth population doesn't have so many opportunities already. We will have to build fridges for people to live in ovens. And they will be young people. So at 4 degrees, city living becomes something very different than it is today. And if cities are not just the places where people live, but are the places where economic growth will be stimulated, that they are the places where innovation happens, they are the places where we invent what future living looks like, this is a very, very profound problem. So we started to ask ourselves different questions about what our goals were, and I know that you've talked a lot about having to have a goal. And I think there is something in the way we frame the question. I mean, normally in the World Bank Group, we would say, what should we do more of? What should we do less of? What should we prioritize? I think we've started saying now, because of course behind all of this is the idea that we have to be partners, is what are the least number of most important things that need to get done to stop 4 degrees? The least number of most important. And then to take ourselves out of it and say, not necessarily by us, because, we invest about $17 to $18 billion a year. We leverage hundreds of billions more than that. But even if we were the most perfect climate smart development financial institution on the face of this earth, which is our aspiration, we wouldn't be able to make much of a difference. It's only going to be in partnership and leveraging others. And even if all of our clients did everything that they wanted to do, we have some shareholders who are not our clients that might have many things to do, especially when it comes to climate mitigation. So if you ask yourself, what are the least number of most important things that need to be done? And then you say, and could we have a role in them? I would suggest that maybe many of you might come up with a slightly different set of programming priorities, or certainly a different view about with whom and how you partner. Certainly we did. When we asked ourselves this question, we really concluded that we need a carbon price. If you had a carbon price today, a lot of the things that we're doing, a lot of the workarounds that we're doing would become less necessary, and finance would start flowing into things that mattered very quickly. So, if you have a carbon price, then we could get finance flowing. These would be important things, and happy to talk about fiscal policy some other time. But we need to work where it matters most, and that's the cities. And so we already do an awful lot of work in urban development all around the world. We're heavily invested in it. We work with a lot of partners. But what could we do more? Where could we play a role as a catalyst, as a partner, as a supporter? And what's interesting is that building off the work that C40 and everybody else have done over the last few years, we did come to the analysis that a lot of cities are now, through different partnerships, thinking about the future and completely understanding that climate change is going to turn the tables on them, struggling to find a way to think through the planning trajectory for that. What am I building my resilience for a 0.5 degree, 1 degree, 2 degree or 4 degree different world? It will mean very different solutions for many cities. And so when we ask ourselves these questions, we recognize the work that everybody else has already done. We recognize that there are a number of cities around the world, C40 members in the lead, who have climate plans. Some of them have climate mitigation plans, some of them have climate resilient or adaptation plans. Some have both. Many have bits and pieces of it, but not the whole thing. But what's really interesting, if you look beyond the members of C40 and you sort of look at the 500 fastest growing cities in the world that have 1 billion residents today, and you start looking at how many of them have got some kind of form of climate planning, and then you look at how many of them are creditworthy in the developing world, which is where we're focused, it's a number that's less than the fingers on these two hands. Now, we have to leverage investment into the bus rapid transit that we talk about, not because we want to go in and talk to a mayor about climate change, but because we want to talk to a mayor about the competitiveness of the poor, which can rise by up to 20% when they can get to work cheaply. We want to talk to them about the air quality that their kids will breathe. And yes, there will be a global public good called GHG emissions reduction, but that's not going to be the message that the mayor takes to the polls. Listen to the partner, work with their language. So maybe, after asking ourselves the question in a different way, maybe the thing that we could do as a partner, which would be the most useful, is to take the 500 cities, the ones who want to work with us to begin with, not everybody wants to work with us or others like us, and say, any city that wants to, we'll put you through creditworthy boot camp. We'll get you creditworthy. And then everybody else who wants to be part of a coalition of the working that's going to get stuff done can start to do the kinds of things that C40 does, and Rockefeller and Mike Bloomberg and Bill Clinton and now Hillary Clinton, and start mobilizing the private investment that will be necessary for the infrastructure for resilient cities of the future. That's not where we started 5 months ago. We didn't think that our biggest contribution might be creditworthiness boot camp, but maybe it will. Which brings me to the last thing that I want to say, really, which is about language and priorities and who does what. I won't go through all the investment numbers. I won't go through the massive gap in investment available to cities today. But it's in the trillions of dollars, and it's not getting any smaller. And when we put climate resilience into that, it gets even more expensive. Now, $1 trillion is actually not a lot of money. There's a lot of money in the system, but unlocking the capital and finding a way for that to reach the bankable, investable projects is something that has evaded us. It's something that we haven't really got our hands around as an international community. And Mark talked about the very great examples of leverage that have been deployed by many different foundations, Rockefeller included, over the last 20 to 30 years. We have a problem that they are still too boutique. And we have a problem not only of scale, but of speed. And so what will it take for us to take all of the excitement and the energy around impact investment and leverage and really find the platforms upon which to do that at greater scale? But just one word about language. We now know from the fields of psychiatry and behavioral psychology, and any of the politicians in the room or former politicians in the room know this intuitively, if not the data, that the way we talk about these problems is a way that we talk to the converted. It doesn't work for the non-converted. We know that the words green, sustainable development, climate change, global warming, my entire vocabulary does not work in terms of persuading anybody who's not already persuaded. It doesn't persuade somebody who's just making it today that they can make it better in the future if there were a greener and more inclusive growth built into their economy. Green doesn't work because those men of you in the audience think that green's a bit of a colour. It's not a macho colour. It's not a colour that makes you respond. If I asked you what the opposite of green is, you would say some kind of maroony brown colour. You wouldn't know how to emotionally respond to green. Your emotional brain would just be flat. People don't vote or make choices about their life based on rational decision making. They make it because they have an emotional attraction to an issue. If I said, what's the opposite of clean, you'd all say, dirty. Right? Well, nobody actually wants to be dirty. And so you have an emotional as well as a rational approach to the word clean. Most of the successful reformers in climate change at the national or regional or city level never talk about climate change. They talk about how to get to work cheaply. They talk about how to get your kids to be able to walk to school without being run down by a car. They talk about how to get your kids clean air. And they talk about how to get access to clean energy at an affordable price. The answers to each and every one of those are about sustainable transport investing, it's about clean energy investment, it's about climate change. But they never ever talk about it. Lisa Jackson, who I think was appreciated more in Europe than in the United States, the former Secretary of the Europe Environmental Protection Agency, I don't think ever said the words climate change in public the whole time she was in office. She talked about clean air for kids. Penny Wong, who was the minister responsible for the introduction of the carbon tax and the cap and trade system that exists in Australia today, when she was in her ministerial post, never talked about climate change. She only ever talked about policies that would support clean energy. There is much more that we can do as a community around this. And of course, the UN Foundation, I think supported by European foundations and others, are doing a lot around this when the next science comes out later this year and next year. But this is something that collectively we have to work on. We cannot feel good. We have to disappear. The language has to be not ours. We have to lose ourselves in that language. The psychiatrists that have studied this will tell you that engineers and environmentalists are really hard to persuade to change the language. They hold on most dear to the specific subclause of the sentence which exactly gets the science right. It has to occur to us that we might be part of the problem. And then we have to build the partnerships that will truly matter. So I welcome the opportunity to talk to you. I think what I want to say is that as we bring a new level of ambition to our work around poverty and prosperity and have gone back to the science, and the science has shown us that everything that we've been doing in urban development for the last 66 years, everything that we've been doing in transport and sustainable transport for the last 20 to 30 years, everything that we have imagined about how we will build cities for the future, or rather how we would help mayors and people build cities for the future, that's all still so important, but that we have a new sense of urgency because those cities are in the front line of something which this world has never seen before. And we have to be there to support them. And the way in which we can support them best might be something that we hadn't thought of before, but that we will only be a small part of that partnership, and that there is a huge role for philanthropy in that, because you have been able to, you lose yourself in the issue. You do have the ability to not have to put your logo at the top of the page. You do have the ability to take patient capital risk. You do have the ability to think and do things outside of the box. And just as we have needed that over the past few decades, we will desperately need that in the 20 years to come. Thank you.